She went and got blue, silver, and black. I got orange, orange, and orange. She's like, Dad, you can't do 3 shades of orange. I'm like, watch me. And so I didn't realize the one was neon. So I'm speaking at a Facebook conference like 2 years ago. And I'm backstage. I went backstage to sit there in like the little, green room, whatever they called it. And it was dark. And I looked down, my shoes are glowing. Everybody's like, whoa, shoes are glowing. So as you guys may or may not know, that about every week, me and this guy, my dad, go live and talk about business and different things in life. And
Fire with Dad, baby.
And he always does that at the exact wrong time when we're on live. And then, what, a month ago you tried to eat Lee's chicken in the middle of the broadcast?
That was Popeyes.
Oh, Popeyes. Yeah, Popeyes from the gas station up there. That's an even better idea. So wanted to talk about today because the one thing I think that ties in perfectly what we're talking about today is having your cell phone on. Wife, I got my phone on. I got everything muted. You can do your favorites. If they call, it goes through. So there you go. Christy's calling.
Cha-ching, baby.
But one thing I see a lot when we talk about, like I was talking about retention marketing, and we're talking about talking to your database about something different, talking to your customers about something different. The other aspect of that is the relationship side of it. And I think that a lot of times we fail to capitalize on those relationships enough. And one of the stories I'll tell you that for me on a marketing standpoint hits home was back when the pandemic hit. There was a restaurant out here called Sugar Fire Barbecue, owned by a local guy. Went to Cub Cath, moved back here for some reason, got in the restaurant business after never being in the restaurant business. Opened it up, and he went out of business like a month or two after COVID hit, but that wasn't what put him out of business. He was probably going out of business before COVID. But the part that hit me pretty hard was that I watched him. I was friends with him on Facebook, and he never talked about his restaurant, never did anything on Facebook about his restaurant personally. It was always just occasionally something with family, which is fine. Well, then the pandemic came, and every day, 5, 10 times a day, it was come eat at my restaurant, it was like urgency, like, oh crap, I got to find people anywhere I can come. And the one thing I looked at with that, to me, it's like a Johnny come lately. It's like the relationship, you went from 0 to 100. I think a lot of times businesses and people, we don't cultivate enough relationships. Like I've got a friend of mine who 20 years ago, I quit answering the phone because every time he called me, it was for something. Early on, we were friends. And then every time he called me, because I was at a different place in my life and I had more funds personally in business, that I was his bank account for donations. And it got to a point where I quit answering the phone for the simple fact that I knew what he was calling for. And so I think from a relationship standpoint, I wanted to talk to you, Dad, and find out some of the things that you think are key to avoid those pitfalls. From a standpoint, like in the restaurant business, there's table touches. From online, there's digital table touches. What do you think about building relationships? What are some of the key components of avoiding being that Johnny come lately?
Well, if I've ever coached anybody in his room, the first thing on my score, he's got a score sheet that he's got for his budgeting thing. I have a score sheet for my coaching. The first thing on my score sheet is called happy calls. I was coaching a lady from American Family Insurance about 10 years ago.
American Family Insurance. Sorry, that was the jingle.
And I actually ran across her again about 2 weeks ago at another event, but I hadn't seen her in about 10 years. But her first coaching session, she says, been around for 10 years. She says, I said, well, how's it going? Well, my first 5 years were pretty good. The last 5 years, I haven't grown any. Everybody I write, I got to replace somebody that just left. I said, well, why do you think that is? She says, boy, I have no clue. I said, when you make a phone call to somebody that's a client of yours, what's the first thing you say to them? Have I got a deal? We got a new thing on insurance. American Family's got a new program. Hey, do I really give a shit? So if you're calling me after that first phone call you call me, I ain't picking the phone up again because I already know what you're going to say. People like to talk about themselves. So if you got a happy call, you call them and say, hey, by the way, I see your daughter's now at EKU, the cheerleading squad. I see your son's in the Air Force. I see your son's doing this. I see you just qualified for 40 under 40. Let them talk about themselves. Because guess what? You start to develop a relationship where now when I call, they want to talk to me because, hey, I'm talking about them, not talking about me. To me, it's all about them. It ain't about you. And the minute you start talking about yourself, guess what? It's just a matter of time when you're not talking to him anymore at all. It's about them. And the more, in business, it's always about them.
And that hits home me also because my background, like I worked with Paul in radio. And about every 2 or 3 months, I get a friend of mine that used to be in radio that's now working somewhere else. And they're all of a sudden an expert the first week they work in that new field. And they literally will come meet with me. Hey, I want to buy you coffee. Hey, I want to have lunch. I want to pick your brain is the term. I'll pick your brain. And we sit down and it's boom. Here's what we do. I actually had a guy recently who tried to explain to me this new thing called geofencing. And I'm like, what? New? Like, what year are you in, bro? But I took the call in the meeting because he's a friend, but it cracks me up because it's the opposite of that, is that I get friends of mine all the time that I know could be selling me something that I could be talking to. Wayne Gartman could have sold me insurance the last 10 years. Never did. When we talked about family and life, and then when it came time that I needed to switch my insurance, who did I think of? I thought of Wayne. You're the only person I called. I didn't shop a rate. I didn't do anything because I know him, and I knew he was the place to go. And one of the reasons was he wasn't calling me. If he was calling me, I don't think you ever called me for business.
Hey, you asshole. No.
But yeah, and hit me initially, and then you made a transition. He had a non-compete. And, he could have called me a billion times and asked me for business, but he didn't. And honestly, that's the reason when I went with him was the fact that I trusted him at a different level. And this goes down from a personal standpoint, but it goes down to also social media. I was telling a story about this, and you'll like this, and you've heard it probably. I was meeting with the marketing director of a pretty big brand up in Ohio. And I say up in Ohio like it's way far away. But I'm up in Ohio meeting with this guy, and the CEO hadn't come out to see me. I had never met him before, but he knew I was there, and I was curious he was going to come out, but he kind of, I guess, big-timed me then. And so I'm meeting with the marketing director, and we're talking about some stuff. And I said, I want to show you where in-store marketing and relationship from a restaurant ties in with online marketing. And he said, how? I said, I want to show you this. Here's 5 of your restaurants. 3 of them I know really well. 2 of them I don't know at all. But we're doing the marketing on your behalf, and I'm just going to make some assumptions. I said, here's the $1,000 that was spent on all 5 restaurants over 60 days each restaurant. They all reached exactly the same amount of people because that's what happens. Engagements got less as we went down. Shares got even less. Comments got less. People that opted in and gave us the data I showed you got even less. And then the redemptions of people walking the front end were non-existent for the lower 2. I said, can I make some assumptions about these 2? And he said, what do you got? I said, well, these first 2 I know this guy. I know him and his wife own this one. I know the owner of this one. I walk in their restaurant. They know my drink. They know my name. I'm a customer. I'm a relationship. This one right here, I bet he's an attorney. He looks at me. CEO walking. Hey, how you doing? I'm like, God, hey, nice to meet you. Tell him you just told me. Told him again. You know him? You know Steve, the attorney? No, why? He goes, how'd you know he's an attorney? I said, because there's 2 people that buy restaurants that typically shouldn't buy restaurants. It's people looking for passive income or people that had a specific skill set like back of house. I said, because the other location, I bet you he's 100% back house. He never leaves the kitchen because every review online is his restaurant is spotless, the food's perfect, but there's nothing about customer interaction. And they said, yeah, he was a general manager of a Chipotle and decided to open a location up, and he's scared to death of customers, and he's selling the restaurant because of it. And when I look at that, the reason I bring that up from your standpoint is that those other locations, the reason they were doing so well online was because when I'm on Facebook, and like Steve Kane, for example, I guarantee you, Pee-wee could post anything on Facebook, and Steve Kane is going to share it. They know each other. They know each other because when Steve Kane and Missy walks in, Pee-wee talks to him. And that developed over years of becoming friends and doing business together. And so if I'm looking at Facebook, an XYZ location that I happen to go and eat there occasionally, but I have no clue of anybody in the business, like this attorney, because when that attorney doesn't make his presence known in the restaurant, his employees don't make their presence known, and they don't give a shit about the customers. You're a number. You're a transaction. I don't share your content. I don't comment. I don't click. I don't share. But when I see something from the other location who's a friend of mine, I share it and say, hey, this is my guy. The food's awesome. You got to get this. Go try it out. And so that's where what you're talking about, the interpersonal relationship inside the business, whether it's in a community, whether it's in a restaurant, whether it's in an auto repair shop, whether it's in a garage door company, goes online because what they say, transfer the trust, is that if I refer, I say, hey, you got to talk to Tom to do business with. It's the same way as I go on Facebook and I share it. People assume the trust.
The other thing on that same line is this. is that when I'm coaching, I see this continuously. Business owners spend all their time working in their business and not on their business. And if you're really going to grow your business, you got to get out and network. You got to become part of the business community where you're involved with different charitable organizations or nonprofits or the Chamber of Commerce or other groups in the community, so you become a person everybody knows who you are. Because guess what? Like I got one client, I got him going to all these, speaking in different engagements, different Chamber of Commerces and what have you, and all of a sudden his business has gone nuts. And he called me, he says, I can't figure out where everybody's coming from. I said, it's because you've been out networking. People are now talking about you when you're not around, which means that you're talking to people and they're out eating lunch with somebody at somewhere else, and they're going, by the way, I talked to so-and-so today. Did you see so-and-so today? Guess what? Now you're a topic of conversation. When that happens, that's just more interaction, and all of a sudden now your business starts to grow because guess what? People are talking about you when you're not there because you're becoming part of the business community rather than just a guy that's got a store.
And the other side of that, which I think hits hard right now, is like David mentioned, there's a lot of restaurants having trouble finding people. I'm of the belief that a lot of reasons a lot of businesses are having trouble finding people is you're not a place they want to be. It's not as though there's not people looking for jobs, it's that you're not a very attractive place. You know, one of the reasons last night's event, I had 4 people here. The only reason I met them was through networking. One of them was a football game with my son, one of them was another business event. And the only reason I wanted them here was I wanted them to possibly work here in the future. We have no problems. I right now have 50 people that want to work for our company. Now, granted, we're different than a lot of retail environments. There's a different level of person. But the reason they want to work with us is that we're active. We're out there. You know, the guy literally, the one person that was here last night, the way the conversation got struck up 2 years ago was orange shoes. Why do you wear orange shoes all the time? It's on me. Asked it flat out. Because he's like, every time I see you got orange shoes. What is the tie? I said, I told him the story. And then we started talking. It turns out his son is in college for marketing. Oh, I'm a marketing guy. We hire marketing people. And so networking has all its different things. Like a lot of restaurants, I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day who has a restaurant, and I said, you know, I don't know that I would be excited to apply at your restaurant either. He says, why? I go, because, dude, you never talk about it. There's no relationship. What's it cost to do a Facebook Live video? 0. YouTube, how much does YouTube cost? LinkedIn. Like this is streamed right now on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. I think even Workplace, our private group for clients there. You know, not, okay, you're fired. No, I'm just kidding. So it's content. It shows your personality. And that's one of the biggest things I've seen is that probably my biggest weakness a few years ago was I was afraid to be Matt Plapp. I wore a golf shirt. I wore a button-up. I wore khaki pants. I wore leather shoes. That's not me. Like, it's like a couple of my friends came last night that look suave in their outfits. I don't look good. I just got to wear gym clothes. It's just me. And so when I started being me and putting my personality online and putting my personality on display, when I started talking to my dad and it wasn't like real buttoned up, it's us yelling at each other and making fun of each other. I usually just make fun of you. You don't got any good comebacks anymore to make fun of me. Maybe I'm just unmake funnable.
You're just a piece of shit.
There you go. But when I started showcasing that personality, you start attracting the right people. Like when I'm giving the tour of the building today, I was telling the people from the chamber and the mayor, I told them what I'm building here. There's going to be a basketball court behind the building. There's going to be a ping pong over there. There's going to be a sauna, a weight room. I'm like, I was even talking to Luis last night. We're in my hot tub, my house. I'm like, man, I got to figure out a place to put a hot tub, like so people can't jump the fence and get in it because I want a hot tub at the office. I'm like, if I do enough stuff that makes me happy as can be, people that like the stuff I like are going to be attracted to it. And I honestly think that's one of the reasons a lot of restaurants can't find employees right now is you're not an attractive profile because you're not out there, you're not about doing that stuff.
Along that same lines, okay, with the orange shoes and the orange everything, one of the things when I'm coaching people is that you got to stand out. So if you got a tagline, okay, what's your tagline? When I was younger, okay, and I was in the insurance business, I did things that were absolutely off the walls crazy, okay, and guess what? My business grew like you wouldn't believe because everybody remembered my name. Everybody knew who I was.
We had the ugliest baseball uniforms. We had green and yellow.
That was for a reason. Okay, nobody had yellow and orange or yellow and green. Okay, I was the only guy, and guess what? If a kid wore and I had 5 baseball teams I sponsored, and each team had 15 to 16 players. Well, all of a sudden you got 15 kids in 5 baseball teams. That's what? 60 kids running around, and kids love to wear their uniforms. So they'd be out at the mall, they'd be anywhere, and they're wearing my uniform all the time. But guess what? I'm yellow and green, and there ain't nobody else yellow and green. So you can see yellow and green 4 miles away. That's Plapp's. That's Plapp's. And guess what? If you stand out, people remember who you are. My wife used to crack me up. She says, I had so many wild sports coats. And kind of a humorous story. I got so well known with my sports coats when I became president of the JCs back in 78, 79. Okay, I had this really wild sports coat I wore quite a bit because it was just off the walls. Okay, all of a sudden, I'm giving a speech for our meetings. Okay, and we had and actually Ralph Drees was the guest of honor that night because we were celebrating something, and Ralph was there. So Ralph's sitting on the podium with me. All of a sudden, 2 guys out of the audience come up and say, "Time out." I'm going, "Time out what?" "Plapp, you're ours. We're tired of seeing this coat." They took each coat and they ripped it in half with me in it. Okay? Place went absolutely nuts. Ralph Drees, I thought, was going to fall off the chair. But guess what? Because I was so outlandish and so crazy, my insurance business boomed like you wouldn't believe. We were one of the largest agencies in Northern Kentucky when I sold it in 91. Because guess what? We stood out. I was involved with all kinds of organizations that everybody knew who. It wasn't anybody in Northern Kentucky that didn't know who Duane Plapp was. And I was the first guy ever to be an insurance man, to be president of the JCs. Guys couldn't believe it. He's president of the JCs and he's an insurance guy? You got to be kidding me.
What was it, usually criminals?
Mostly attorneys and attorneys and accountants. I was the first guy ever to be, they were all attorneys. We had 300 members. We were number 1 in our state of Kentucky. We were number 2 in the nation when I was president. But we had 80 attorneys out of the 300 guys. So no one could believe an insurance guy was president. Why? I stood out in the audience. I got people liking me, and I became buddies with everybody. Guess what? Things happen when you do that.
Talking about the colors part, like he was responsible for making the 80s really ugly in Northern Kentucky because our baseball uniforms were terrible. But people remembered it. I actually had a friend of mine about 10 years ago that joked about it. That I remember my mom, when I would ask her like who we were playing, she'd say the team that wears yellow and green. Oh, the insurance company, yeah. And like around here, I'm sure if I say HVAC company in Northern Kentucky, what do you think of?
The Pink Boys.
The Pink Boys. It's all over the place. You see it. That was one thing. I had a guy. Two things that cracked me up a couple weeks ago was last week I'm in the DMV paying my taxes on the car, getting the tags renewed, and this guy comes running in and goes, "Matt, I figured that was you. I saw an orange sweatshirt." And it was me, but then I'm thinking, well, what if it wasn't me? Well, another buddy of mine told me a story where he was meeting me, and this was last year, meeting me somewhere, and he walked up and hugged some random dude from behind at the luggage carousel, turns around, and it wasn't a white guy, and he was wearing orange. I'm like, you just randomly hug white dudes in the terminal, right? He's like, I thought it was you. Like, well, it wasn't me.
When we had our store, we had Hummers, and I'll never forget this. We got lucky enough that Hummers were just rocking and rolling on TV, and there was a yellow Hummer every commercial on TV. Okay, and so our Hummers were yellow, but they were all wrapped. Okay, with different logos on them, and they were just. I mean, I used to get calls all the time. Can I drive the week?
Well, you get called all the time when you're driving, complaining about your driving.
Excuse me. Well, anyway, so I'm standing in the store one day, and this guy walks in, and Hummers were, I guess, on the other side of the building. And he said, well, saw your Hummer last night. Oh, where'd you see it? He tells me, they were sitting, I'm sitting to myself there.
West Virginia, he said.
Yeah, and I'm going, he had seen a yellow Hummer.
Yeah. He goes, you didn't have the logos on it, though.
Yeah, I saw the yellow Hummer. But I tell you what, we if you bought a boat from us, you got to drive the Hummer for a week. And you'd be surprised, the guys, they were dying. But the nice thing about it is this. I found that birds of a feather flock together. So if I've got a bass boat and I'm in neighborhood X, probably everybody in the neighborhood fishes. All birds of a feather flock together. So guess what? You pull in with a Hummer with a brand new bass boat, your neighbors are all over there. Guess what? Next 3 days, I've sold 3 boats. All because that Hummer's sitting in the guy's driveway. It's all about standing out, making yourself understood, getting involved with the community, getting more. The more you do this, the whole interaction thing, the more your business grows.
It's all impressions of a different nature. And I see it all the time. And the orange thing for me, it's a different story for every time. It happened on accident with our business, and I just adopted it and took it on. But it all comes full circle. That the more you're engaged in people, the more personal conversations, the more relationships you have, the more things happen. And whether it's wearing orange shoes and that starts a conversation, or whether it's sponsoring Cubcat football and being involved in the Boosters Club, it all comes full circle. And a lot of it, with today's digital age and Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube, all of those relationships in person transfer to online. And it's always comical because I look at it when I make certain posts online that get zero engagement. They're typically self-fulfilling posts. When I make a post of Paige at Eastern Kentucky doing a flip in the air, it's 100 times bigger. And then you kind of got to piggyback those. But it all comes full circle to me that what you do in your store, what you do on the streets, what you do online, all has to coordinate. I heard an expert the other day. I was listening to a guy named Brad Lee, who's really good. He's on Instagram. He's a Las Vegas guy. He said it cracks him up how many business owners hide their Facebook profiles, are ghosts on Instagram, aren't active. You know what? 90% of what you see of Matt Plapp, give you a hint, Matt Plapp didn't post it. I'm not that active. I'm on Facebook or Instagram less than probably 2 to 3 minutes a day. But I have people on my team. I've gotten away from it personally because I'm trying to get my focus other places. So the excuse of saying I'm not on Facebook, well, good. Guess who wasn't on Facebook ever? Ever heard of a car dealership named Jeff Weiler? When we did Jeff Weiler's social media for about 7 years, about a year into it, I said, Mr. Weiler, you need to be on Facebook. I'm not doing that. I'm like, good. Sign off and let me be you. I was Jeff Weiler for 3 years on Facebook.
I kept getting birthday wishes from Jeff Weiler.
I would mess with friends. I would send private messages to friends of mine that were advertising sales reps that I knew was their account. And I'd say, hey, Bryson, happy birthday, brother. Hope it's a good one. Oh, my God, Jeff Weiler on Facebook. It was me. But I went on there because I knew it was important for him to have a presence, that it would be a way for them to talk about the charitable efforts, for them to make relationships, make connections. I think that's a huge opportunity out there, is that people don't network enough in person, they don't network enough online, and they're not visible enough in the correct manner. And that's one of the reasons a lot of businesses stagnate, like when the pandemic comes along and Sugar Fire Barbecue is hurting for business, and all of a sudden now the owner is Johnny Come Lately, and he's a great guy, and he had an awesome restaurant, I think. Just was a bad location, a bad timing. But now all of a sudden he's on there begging for business, where there was never anything before that, and there's no relationship, there's no liking comments. Like, I don't just go online and randomly do stuff. Everything is strategically thought out. That's all I got. Any questions, comments, concerns? Yes, sir.
Off the top of your head,
7.
Of the attractive
Oh, I thought it was a guessing
type of
game.
things that you're talking about, I mean, you're in and with a lot of restaurateurs like us, that what would be the most attractive benefits to a new hire that you would say that people do and do it well?
A place I can relate with. A place that I know who the owner is. I know their personality. They say, I had a business coach I met with last week and 2 weeks ago in San Diego, and she knows me really well. And she's like, Matt, the problem I see with your content online is that most of it's not really you. You've come a long way 3 years ago, but you're not you yet. And you've got to get over that barrier and be yourself, because the minute you're 100% authentic, it comes through even more. And those people do it. Like when Paul and I, when we were at WLW, I remember Daryl Parks had that cutout on his wall. And he would tell Willie, Bill Cunningham and McConnell, and say, hey, that's the person you're talking to. 100%. And so for you, you've got to figure out that person. Like, don't talk to everybody. Talk to one customer. My customer's name when I talk online is a guy named Jim. He actually exists. I know him really well. But he's my ideal fit. If I talk to him and relate to him and get his attention and have a relationship online and in person, it'll balloon out. So I think from a customer hire standpoint, the reason people don't want to work at certain restaurants is that they don't know anybody there. Their mom or dad doesn't work there. Or their mom or dad have a friend that works there. They don't know the owner. There's not a cool factor.
And they're not talked about in the community. Like for instance, barleycorns. I mean, everybody wants to work at barleycorns many times because of the fact that everybody talked about barleycorns. I mean, I knew Kenny Heil when he just started the place back in the 70s, okay? When he was in downtown on 6th Street, and they just opened the one in Lakeside Park. And Kenny was out and about, okay, talking to people all the time. And all of a sudden now, if I'm talked about all the time and everybody's talking about my restaurant, guess what? It must be a nice place to work.
I mean, that's one of the reasons. I mean, there's certain jobs that people, like my wife was complaining one day about McDonald's. I said, Christy, I want you to look at the employee there. It's either a very young kid that doesn't give a shit, or it's a person that's probably in their 40s that's had a wrong part of life and has a lot of other issues. This is just to get to A to B. I said, so they don't care. But like you mentioned Barleycorn, it's kind of funny. My daughter, for whatever reason, got an idea she was going to apply for a job and go to work at Barleycorns. And she had no time. She cheered. She had 2 different cheer things. She had all this crap going on. She already lifeguarded. She worked there for a week because she didn't have a schedule. But the reason she applied to Barleycorns, because we go and eat there, because we know people, because it looks like a cool place. She didn't apply anywhere else. I remember she applied. I'm like, you don't have time to work. And she worked like 3 days. She's like, oh, I can't work the next month because of my schedule. I'm like, I could have told you that. But she wanted to work at Barleycorns. And that's why I think the problem is that you don't have not saying you, but a lot of people don't have an attractive personality. There's not somebody on there that's being fun, that's being wacky. That, if there's 100 people out there looking for a job, you don't want all of them. You want the ones that relate with you. And so I think showcasing personality, that's the biggest problem right now. The biggest advantage we saw of businesses we worked with that succeeded during the pandemic versus the ones that didn't was that consumers supported them because they knew who they were and they had a relationship whether they did or not. Back when we had the boat dealership, and I'll end with this, and this kind of tells the whole story, we had a boat brand called Triton Bass Boats. Earl Bentz was the founder. Earl Bentz started Stratus and Hydrosport. He was a mecca. He still is. He's the mecca in the bass boat world.
I started another one 2 years ago.
Yeah, at Camus. Everybody knows him. So we're at a boat show, and there's always this thing in the funny part of the boat business. People come up to your boat booth, and Jason probably, I know that I can buy a boat from the factory. There's always this, they know somebody at the factory, they can get a better, but I'm here to buy it from you. Well, it doesn't exist. And this guy's like, hey, I could get a Triton from the factory. I'm friends with Earl, but I'm here to buy from you because I want to support a local dealer. So we get talking, and I know he's bullshitting. And so we get talking. About a half hour later, I figure out how he knows Earl. Earl waved at him at a bass fishing, no lie. It came down, the whole conversation, he's like, hey, how are you? Shook his hand, went on his way, like he was shaking hands, kissing babies. This guy now is friends with Earl Bentz and buying a boat because of that. Well, if you look at the biggest problem we saw that our clients got overtook, and I'll say there's a place called Fatty's Smokehouse in Moore, Oklahoma, Brian Picard and his wife and his brother. Brian was always active on Facebook Live. You supported Fatty's when the pandemic happened because you knew it affected Brian. You knew it affected Kathy. You knew it affected Mark. When I looked back, it was in June. Tom did some research last summer. I said, what are our clients that are working really well? What are the ones that aren't? And at the same time, I started thinking of myself. And I looked at where I ate. You know how many times we ate barleycorns in the parking lot of my wife's SUV during the pandemic because they were closed? It was every week. Like my wife had buffalo wing sauce all over her Infinity because every week we went there. We had like 5 restaurants we supported. Colonial Cottage, get it across the gym we own, and I eat Colonial Cottage in the gym. And the reason we did it wasn't because we had plenty of choices. But then I started looking back, and I never went to about 15 restaurants around the area. I hadn't even thought about them. I thought, why? I don't know anybody. I don't like anybody. I know that if the Hiles don't get supported, it hurts them, it hurts their family, it hurts their friends, hurts their employees. I have no clue who owns McDonald's on Union. I could give a shit. And I haven't been there in probably 2 years. And so when you ask about what makes an impact, to me, what makes an impact is that the more the customers know Rex, know the girl behind the counter, know your manager, hear the fun story, see the machine blow up, see something getting dropped, see fun stuff, they do it. And the biggest atrocity in all of marketing right now is the number of restaurants, business owners, period, that are not doing video content. That's why we installed that podcast room up there. It's free of charge. Anybody in the restaurant space wants to use it. And even businesses local, I don't really care. If Jason wants to come by and start a podcast on Mastercraft boats, come on by. Because if you're not telling your story, you might have success short term, but long term, you lose. You know, I had some windows open on here that I was showing somebody the other day. I don't know if they're still on here. Is that, here it is. I was showing them like YouTube. Yeah, my YouTube videos don't blow up, but they get 30, 100, 137. They go up. You look at, in the last 365 days, I've had 84,000 views. That cost me nothing. And the fact that there's businesses every day, that's just Facebook, or that's just YouTube. There's Facebook, there's Instagram, are we on TikTok? I mean, America's Best is on TikTok. You know, there's all these places. It's free. And so if I'm you, the way to overcome that is to have a relationship with people digitally And now all of a sudden, you're the cool, funny guy. You're the place, like somebody's like, got to get a job or they're looking for a job. That's where they're going to go.
One final thought for me was, I coached about 24 franchises of one occupation. They were in a home care business, and I had 5 or 6 of them who I had gotten to get on Facebook and do Facebook Live. And the ones who weren't doing it were getting the corporation, the home office franchise was putting things on Facebook, and it was just generic. And the guys were getting 10 views, okay, and maybe 4 or 5 likes, and that was about it. The guys that I had getting on Facebook Live, the one of them in Richmond, Virginia, okay, was getting 1,000 views on every single one of his Facebook Lives. He was getting 1,000 plus views on other things that he was doing. And the home office on their corporate thing wasn't, they finally called me and said, what are you doing to get 1,000 views? We average 50. So, because I'm on live. I'm doing it. And guess what? He was a brand new franchise, and within 1 year, he was larger than probably half the franchises in the entire 130 franchises, because guess what? And it was costing him nothing. He was doing it Fridays at 3 o'clock. Okay, he would do a 15-minute thing, and it's so funny. It was first way he called me. He said, "My God, Duane, this is hard as shit. I cannot believe I'm doing this thing." And I said, "Just keep doing it." After about a month and a half, he's going, "I can't believe I haven't been doing this all along. It's a piece of cake."
My first Facebook Live, guess how many viewers it had? 0. And I remember going, you're an idiot. Like, there's nobody even watching. What are your friends going to think? What are your neighbors going to think? And I remember literally, I saw Mike Frederick recently at Montgomery and Boathouse. And it was kind of comical because as I'm parking the Lambo out front and I walk in, he goes, "Oh, there's the man. I'm surprised you're not on the video." I'm like, "Well, this video is paid for that. Thank you." Maybe you should be on video more. Maybe your business will be bigger.
Well, I'm on the board of the Home Builder Association in Cincinnati. I'm on the.
They put you on an actual board?
Yeah, they actually know who I am. Anyway, when I'll go to a networking event, okay, for years and years, okay, it was always, Matt would go to an event and they'd say, "Your dad's Duane." I go to networking events now. I was at one on Thursday night as after hours for the home builders over at Homerama in Cincinnati, and I had about 4 people walk up to me. "Is your son Matt Plapp? I see him on video all the time." "Yeah, I'm Matt's dad." I'm going, "Hello? I've been doing it 50 years, man."
Better looking.
Well,
That's all we got. Let's get some food. There's food in there. There's drinks in the kitchen. And then we'll get back here after lunch.